is Susan Matson, Master Gardener. I'm here today with Bonita Callistad and Vanjie Harriet. We're out on the shores of beautiful Lake Florida, and today we are with Vanjie, who will be doing some dividing of plants and repotting of plants. This works particularly well with the hostas that we're going to be attacking today. And we also have, there's also a number of other plants around you that would be good for dividing. And one is sedum and another one would be iris. And so if you have plants that needed to be divided, I'm going to pass this over to either Vanjie or Bonita to tell us a little bit about how the process is. As you can see, there's plenty of mulch around her plants so that she'll be able to protect them from the summer heat or any drought that we have this year. So, Vanjie, maybe you'd like to say a few words about what you plan to do.
Well, these plants have not been divided now for a couple of years, so they're starting to get root bound. So I will be pulling back. There is plastic here also, so I've pulled back the plastic, and now I will just be using a digging fork and going in there and trying to get as much of the plant out as I can.
Do you want to say something?
And as she's digging this, we'll be ready to help her divide it. And sometimes the digging them can be quite a challenge if the roots are really well grown. So often the person needs to go all the way around and loosen the soil. Now notice she's using a garden fork, which is often very helpful, and usually going all the way around to loosen the soil. And I believe you said you had moistened the soil too, so it's not real hard, which I think also is a good thing to keep in mind, because if it's rock hard, it's very difficult to be using the garden fork.
So the next step after she gets the plant out of the ground would be to divide it into, could be halves, or it could be divided into fourths. This is not a huge plant. Some of mine are absolutely enormous. They get to be quite wide after several years. And so it is probably going to be a little bit difficult to divide it into fourths. So they probably will be dividing it into halves. So right now, though, it seems to be fairly well rooted in the ground. So now they're going at it with a small spade. And sometimes that's what I actually use and at my house, because I have a wide spade. And now the plant is beginning to move a little bit. So it looks like it's getting to the point where it might be getting ready to pop out of the ground. Hard to say. So, there it goes. It's getting so that the other thing is, once you get it out of the ground, now normally what I do is I take a large knife and split it that way, but you can also use the blade of a spade to, sorry about that, they're working at this. Let me tell you, this is what what happens when you are dividing plants. Some of them will come right out of the ground so easily, and others will be a chore to divide. For me, it's something that I don't do as often as I should, simply because of the difficulty that I sometimes have had. So we'll take a short break here, and we'll be back in a minute as they work. All right, it looks like they've made some progress and the plant is gradually coming out of the ground. It was a combined effort of a master gardener and the home gardener here to get it out of the ground and ready for dividing. And so finally, and Vanjie actually has another place for the new plants to go. She has some plastic here that she'll be putting the plant in to carry it across the yard. And then she'll also be feeding the new plants to give them an extra boost before they start growing in their new home.
So it's good to think a minute once you have it loosened from the ground to decide if you want it in half or in thirds and where's the best spot to attack it. And then usually it's often, I find you just about have to jump on the shovel to get through those hard roots. And it may take a few. There we go, making progress. Should I kind of put my foot on this side to give it a little, hold it in place here? And you're making progress. And then at some point yeah, I should be okay. Then at some point it'll just kind of pop in half. Right? And Vange has already decided where she's going to replant these two chunks. She will now have two wonderful hosta plants. And you'll notice that she has them in a spot that gets shade because many hostas prefer shade. There are a few that you can do well in the sun, but it's always good to check because most of them prefer shade. All right. You've got it divided.
All right, she finished the division of the plant, and as you can see, now she'll be, the remaining plant in that area will be kind of put in the central part of the hole that was left there, and then she'll probably do a little feeding of that one too. Sometimes plants can get stressed. Okay. Okay, so she's going to do another division on that one because it was large enough. So once you get it out of the hole and the roots removed, it's easiest to do it now than it is to go back in another year. And you don't have to worry about it looking kind of brutal because surprisingly hostas are, for the most part, fairly rigorous as far as keeping keeping the growth, keeping everything else. She's got plenty of roots there to work with for dividing the plant. But as you can tell, it's not something that's going to be an easy job. It's something that I don't do very often because I find that it's so frustrating just trying to get it out of the initial part, and some are more difficult than others. So here we have the remaining piece that will need to be filled in a little bit. All right, we have one other plant as long as they're both in the mood to be digging around a plant. This is a daylily, or is it the iris? Okay, daylily that she's going to be dividing. Those, to me, have always been a little easier, but we'll see how that one goes. And it's the same procedure, taking a fork or a small spade and digging down and lifting up on the plant. See how much easier this one was than the hosta. So they're getting, and there's also some plastic in here that they're working around, so it's going to be a little more difficult. That came out much easier, and it will be divided in half. One thing you need to be sure, too, after you have divided a plant, to give it extra water and a little bit of plant food. The type of plant food that I normally use for divisions is an Osmocote or a time release. They come in jars with their little capsules, and put those around, and then it probably wouldn't hurt to give it a shoot of a liquid plant food too once in a while. So they're dividing that daylily into two different two different parts. They're taking the best. So we have 3 new plants that will be moved, and I believe we're going to try to replant 1, right, out of the 3? Okay, so let's take those over to the other part of the garden where the new plant will go in. All right, the hole is dug, and Vanjie has the new plant ready to go into the hole. As you can see, the hole is a little bit larger than what the plant will be. And so she also has a bucket of some plant food that's already mixed up. So that will be ready to go. She's adding a little bit to the hole for the plant before she puts it in.
And I was just going to comment that Vange told us that this was a spot that she had a plant in the past, but it's one of those that just didn't survive for the winter. So it made a perfect spot for moving the plant that she was wanting to divide.
Noting that this is a large leaf hosta. This is a large leaf. This is a bit more of a medium, and then this will have a gold color to it. So got a little color contrast here also, and size.
Okay. Very good. If you are familiar with hostas, you know that there are many, many varieties and many colored leaves. Some are very bright, some are average, just the greens, and then some have enormous leaves. Some of the more shade-loving plants have very, very large leaves. I think there's one called Emperor Wu that has enormous leaves, and it's very tall. So you'll want to kind of put your hostas in different areas so that they go well together. So as you can see, they're working to get it planted back in the hole. There's a lot of mulch here that will be used to cover the area around the plant after they get it into the ground. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it will be a successful season for our hostas, and that next year, especially during the winter, we'll have a good winter with everything covered. Is there anything else you would like to add to our project here?
Well, it's just a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work.
How about you?
But what a good feeling. Once you have divided something, you know that you've got a good start for the season.
All right, so Benita Kalistad and Vanjie Harriet, we will sign off on our project today, and happy gardening.